The winter wind didn't just bite, it clawed. It howled across the Colorado prairie, carrying the stink of burnt pine and gunpowder, and it was the only sound Ruby Callahan could hear over the ringing in her ears. She stood in the snow, a tattered shawl her only shield, and stared at the smoking black bones of her home. Everything was gone. Her mother, her father, the life they'd scraped from this hard land. All of it turned to ash in a single violent night. She was 20 years old, and all she owned was the thin dress on her back and a heart full of jagged, broken pieces. The promise of the West, the silver dreams that brought them from Boston, had become a nightmare of fire and blood. Soot and frozen tears streaked her face. She knelt, her fingers brushing against a piece of charred wood, her father's rocking chair. He'd spent a month carving the spindles, whistling the whole time. The bandits, they'd taken everything. The little bit of silver, her mother's wedding ring, the horses. They'd cracked her on the head and left her for dead in the dirt before lighting the match. A miracle she woke up. A miracle she crawled out of the flames. But as she looked out at the endless empty snow, she wondered if it was a miracle she wanted. A deep voice cut through the wind. "Miss, miss, are you hurt?" Ruby scrambled back, grabbing the chunk of burnt wood. Her only weapon. A man on a tall chestnut horse watched her from 20 yards out. His face was hidden by the brim of his hat, his shoulders broad and dusted with snow. A rifle was holstered at his hip. "Stay back," she croaked, her voice raw. "There's nothing left to take." He didn't listen. He swung down from the saddle in one smooth, practiced motion, his boots crunching in the snow. He was coming closer. "I'm not here to take anything, miss. Saw the smoke." He took off his hat, and she saw his eyes. They were kind. Too kind. "Name's Samuel Blackwood. My ranch is a few miles east." Ruby didn't lower her club. "I've heard of the Blackwood Ranch." "This was the Callahan place," he said, not a question. His eyes swept over the ruin, and his face hardened. "What happened?" "Bandits," she spat the word. "They came in the night. My parents." Her voice broke. "The Reeves gang," he said, the name a low growl. "They've been hitting homesteads all over the territory." He took another step. "You can't stay here, Miss Callahan. The temperature's dropping." She clutched her shawl tighter. He was right. The cold was already seeping into her bones. "I have nowhere to go." "My ranch isn't far," he offered. "We've got a good woman there, our cook. You'd be safe." She stared at him, suspicion warring with desperation. A woman alone didn't just go off with a strange man. Not here, not anywhere. But the alternative was freezing to death right where she stood. "Why would you help me?" His eyes met hers. "Out here, we help our neighbors. It's the only way we survive." He held out a gloved hand. "Please, let me help you." For a long moment, she just stared at his hand. Then, with nothing left to lose, she dropped the piece of wood. What other choice did she have? He came forward, slipping his heavy coat from his shoulders and draping it around her. It was heavy and warm, and it smelled of leather and pine. He helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her, his presence a solid wall against the wind. As they rode away, she didn't look back. She couldn't. The journey was silent. The rhythm of the horse's hooves on the snow was the only sound. The Blackwood Ranch was nothing like her family's small homestead. It was a serious operation, with a large main house of log and stone, a massive barn, and several outbuildings. Lanterns glowed in the windows, a beacon against the coming night. A woman came out of the house as they approached, wiping her hands on an apron. "Samuel Blackwood, what have you brought home now?" she called, her voice sharp, but her eyes full of worry. "Mrs. Winters, this is Miss Ruby Callahan," Samuel said, helping Ruby down. "The Reeves gang hit her homestead. She's the only one who made it out." The woman's face changed in an instant. "Oh, you poor thing." She rushed forward. Her name was Martha, and her hands were surprisingly strong as she guided Ruby inside. The kitchen was warm and filled with the smell of stew. Before Ruby could protest, Martha had her seated at a table with a steaming bowl in front of her. Samuel lingered by the door. "I need to tell the men. See to my horse." He disappeared into the dusk, leaving her with the kind, bustling woman. "Eat, child," Martha urged. "You need your strength." Ruby took a spoonful, but couldn't taste it. "He said you were the cook." "Housekeeper and cook," Martha corrected. "Been with the Blackwoods since Samuel was a boy." She studied Ruby with knowing eyes. "Do you have any kin? Anywhere we can send word?" Ruby shook her head. "No one." The full weight of it hit her again. "I don't know what I'm going to do." "One thing at a time," Martha said, patting her hand. "Tonight, you rest." Later, in a small, clean room off the kitchen, Ruby finally let herself break. She cried for her parents, for her lost home, until there were no tears left. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the fire. She heard the shouts. When dawn finally came, she dressed in the loose, borrowed clothes Martha had left for her and went back to the kitchen. Samuel was there, stamping snow from his boots. "Miss Callahan," he nodded, his eyes careful, like he was afraid she might break. "Ruby," she said softly. A small smile touched his face. "Ruby." He took a mug of coffee from Martha. "I rode out to your place this morning with a couple of my men." His voice was gentle. "We took care of your parents, buried them under the big elm. I hope that was all right." Tears sprang to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "That was their favorite spot." "We also found this," he said, reaching into his pocket. He held out his hand. Lying in his palm was her mother's locket, a simple silver oval, etched with a rose. Ruby's breath caught in her throat. She took it with a trembling hand. I thought they took it." This was her grandmother's, the one thing she had left. "Must have fallen off in the struggle," Samuel said. "We found it near your father." He hesitated for a moment. "I've been thinking. Winter's setting in hard. It's not safe to travel. I'd like to offer you a place here. Until spring, at least. Martha could use the help." Ruby looked from his earnest face to Martha's nodding one. It was a lifeline. "I accept," she said. "I'll earn my keep." "I know you will," Samuel said, and for the first time, he gave her a real smile. "Welcome to Blackwood Ranch, Ruby Callahan." The days that followed were a blur of hard work. Ruby scrubbed floors, mended clothes, and helped Martha cook for the 6 ranch hands. The physical labor was a blessing, the only thing that kept the nightmares at bay. She rarely saw Samuel. He was gone before she woke, and back long after she went to bed. But she found herself looking for him, this quiet, serious man who had saved her life. One night she was mending one of his shirts by the fire when he came in, shaking snow from his coat. "Evening, Ruby." "Samuel," she replied, remembering his request. He came and stood by the fire, warming his hands. The firelight caught the gold in his brown hair, and she noticed again how kind his eyes were. But there was a sadness in them too, a shadow she couldn't quite place. "How are you settling in?" he asked. "Well enough. The work helps." "And the grief?" he asked, his directness surprising her. "Does it get any easier?" "Some days," she admitted. "The nights are the worst." "Yes," he said, and the single word was filled with a deep, personal understanding. "My mother died when I was 10. My father, 5 years ago. The emptiness, it doesn't go away. You just learn how to carry it." His words were a comfort, more so than any empty platitudes she had heard. They talked for a while longer, about his parents, about the ranch. Then he straightened up. "I'm riding into town for supplies tomorrow. Is there anything you need?" She thought of her single set of borrowed clothes. "I have no money for—" "Consider it an advance on your wages," he said gently. "Or better yet, why don't you come with me? A change of scenery might do you good." The invitation was unexpected. A real smile touched her lips. "I'd like that very much." The next morning, they set off in a wagon under a clear, cold sky. Samuel was easier to talk to away from the ranch. He told her stories about his father building the place from nothing. He asked about her life in Boston, about her father's dream of finding silver. "He was never much of a miner," she said with a sad smile. "But he loved the freedom out here." "It gets in your blood," Samuel agreed, his eyes on the vast, snow-covered hills. Silver Creek wasn't much of a town, a single dusty street with a general store, a blacksmith, and a saloon. As they entered the store, the owner, a man named Patterson, greeted Samuel warmly before his eyes fell on Ruby. "Callahan," he said, his face clouding with pity. "Heard what happened. Terrible business. My condolences." Ruby just nodded, an uncomfortable heat rising in her cheeks. While Samuel dealt with his list of supplies, she looked at the bolts of fabric. She chose a practical blue cotton for a work dress and a warmer brown wool. As she was measuring the cloth, the bell on the door jingled. 3 women swept in, their dresses far too fine for a frontier town. The oldest, a sharp-faced woman named Mrs. Hughes, immediately honed in on Samuel. "Mr. Blackwood," she cooed. "What a pleasant surprise. My Sophia has been asking after you." She gestured to her pretty, blushing daughter. "You simply must come to our Christmas party." Samuel looked trapped. "Ranch business has been keeping me busy." Mrs. Hughes's sharp eyes landed on Ruby, dismissing her in a single glance. "And who is this?" Samuel stepped to Ruby's side. "This is Miss Ruby Callahan. She's recently joined my household staff." The word staff stung. It was true, but hearing it said so plainly in front of these women was a fresh wound. "Callahan," Mrs. Hughes said, tapping her chin. "Ah, yes, the family that was. So unfortunate." Her tone was laced with a strange sort of disapproval, as if her parents had been careless. Then her eyes narrowed, just for a second, and she looked from Ruby to Samuel and back again. "How very charitable of you, Mr. Blackwood, to take in strays." The air grew thick. Samuel's jaw tightened. "Miss Callahan is a valued member of my ranch," he said, his voice dangerously low. He placed a hand on Ruby's elbow. "Have you found what you need?" They finished their shopping in silence. As they were leaving, the daughter, Sophia, caught up to them. "I do hope you'll reconsider about the party," she said to Samuel, but her eyes darted to Ruby. "You'd be welcome too, of course." There was an odd flicker in her expression. Pity, or was it a warning? On the ride back, Samuel finally broke the silence. "I apologize for Mrs. Hughes, and for my choice of words." "It was accurate," Ruby said quietly. "I am your employee." "You're more than that," he said firmly. "You're a neighbor, a friend." The sincerity in his voice was a balm on her bruised feelings. They rode on, the only sound the crunch of the snow under the wagon wheels. Then Samuel spoke again. "Would you like to go to that Christmas party? With me?" Ruby stared at him. "Wouldn't that cause talk? The ranch owner and his housekeeper." A stubborn look came over his face. "Let them talk. You deserve a night of enjoyment. Besides," he added, a hint of a smile in his voice, "I can't stand those things alone. I need a friend with me." She shouldn't. She knew she shouldn't. It would only feed the gossip. But the thought of a normal evening, of music and lights and forgetting, just for a few hours, was too tempting. "I would like that," she said. Then she remembered her borrowed clothes. "But I have nothing to wear." Samuel's smile was genuine this time. "I believe we just purchased some fabric, did we not?" In the evenings leading up to the party, Ruby worked on her dress. It was simple, the blue cotton, but it was hers. Martha helped, her knowing glances making Ruby blush. "He's a good man," Martha said one night as Ruby stitched a seam. "Too serious since his father passed. It does an old woman's heart good to see him smile again. And it's you that's brought that smile back." The night of the party was cold and clear. The stars looked like chips of ice in the black sky. When Ruby came out of her room, Samuel was waiting. He was dressed in a dark suit, looking more like a gentleman from Boston than a Colorado rancher. He stopped when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said, and the way he looked at her made her stomach flutter. The ride to town was like a dream. He'd brought a sleigh with jingling bells. The church hall was blazing with light and filled with the sound of music and laughter. As they entered, every head turned. Ruby felt a blush creep up her neck, but Samuel's hand was steady on her back. He guided her through the crowd, nodding to people, his presence a shield. He asked her to dance. The musicians were playing a waltz, and he swung her out onto the floor. He was a surprisingly good dancer. "My mother insisted on lessons," he said, his eyes smiling down at her. "Said no son of hers would be a savage." As they danced, she felt the eyes of the town on them. They weren't just curious glances anymore. They were speculative. "People are talking about us," she murmured. "Let them," he said, his hand tightening just a little at her waist. Later, he led her outside onto the porch for some fresh air. The night was quiet and cold. The stars seemed close enough to touch. "Ruby," he started, his voice serious. "There's something I've been meaning to." But the door creaked open, and Sophia Hughes stepped out. "Mr. Blackwood, the mayor is about to give his speech." Her smile was bright, but her eyes, when they flickered to Ruby, were cold. The moment was broken. "It can wait," Samuel said as they went back inside, but the question hung in the air between them all the way back to the ranch. What had he been about to say? The weeks after Christmas changed things. Samuel started joining her for dinner. They would sit by the fire and talk for hours. He lent her books from his father's library. She found herself falling for him, for his quiet strength, his hidden humor, his unexpected kindness. And she thought, she hoped, he was falling for her too. The ranch started to feel like home, a real home. Then, one stormy afternoon in late January, a rider brought news. The Reeves gang had been spotted just 15 miles away. A posse was being formed. "Are you going?" Ruby asked, her heart a cold knot of fear in her chest. "I have to," Samuel said, his face grim. "We can't let them get away with what they did. To you." The night before he left, she couldn't sleep. She kept seeing the fire, hearing the gunshots. What if he didn't come back? In the gray light of dawn, he stood in the kitchen, dressed in his heavy winter gear, his rifle in his hand. He turned to her. "I'll be careful," he promised. He reached out and touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I will come back, Ruby. You have my word." The next 3 days were the longest of her life. The storm raged, trapping them at the ranch. The house felt huge and empty without him. On the 4th morning, the storm broke. Ruby was in the kitchen when she heard shouts from the yard. She ran to the window. Riders. And Samuel was with them. She flew out the door, not even feeling the cold. He dismounted, his face tired and stubbled, but he broke into a grin when he saw her. You're back, she breathed, relief washing over her. I gave you my word, he said. And that's when she saw it. A crude, bloody bandage was wrapped around his left arm. You're hurt. It's just a graze, he said, but she was already pulling him inside. Martha, get some hot water. She unwrapped the bandage herself in the warm kitchen. It was more than a graze. It was a deep, angry gash where a bullet had torn through his coat and flesh. As she cleaned it, her hands gentle, she finally asked, "What happened?" His jaw tightened. "We found them, holed up in an old mining camp. There was a firefight." He looked her straight in the eye. "Reeves, we captured him. Alive." Ruby's hands froze. "He's in custody?" "He's on his way to Denver for trial," Samuel said. "He'll hang for what he did, Ruby." A strange mix of relief and emptiness washed over her. It was over. The men who killed her parents would face justice. "Thank you," she whispered, tying off the new clean bandage. "For going after them." He caught her hand. "I would have hunted them to the ends of the earth," he said, his voice low and intense. "For what they did to you." The look in his eyes wasn't just concern. It was something more, something deeper, something that made her heart skip a beat. That evening he found her by the fire. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I thought I would feel better," she admitted. "But it doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring them back." "Justice isn't the same as healing," he said quietly. He leaned forward, his face serious. "Ruby, when I offered you a place here, I said you could leave in the spring. Is that still your plan?" She looked at him, at this man who had become her whole world. The thought of leaving was unbearable. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I haven't thought about it." A flicker of hope lit his eyes. "Good, because I don't want you to leave." He took a deep breath. "Not as an employee, Ruby. Not at all." He moved from his chair and knelt in front of her, taking both her hands in his. "These past few months, you've shown me what was missing from my life. It wasn't just companionship. It was you." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I love you, Ruby Callahan. I think I have since the day I found you standing in the ashes, refusing to give up." Tears streamed down her face, but this time they were tears of joy. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Will you build a new life with me?" "Yes," she whispered, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Oh, yes." He stood, pulling her into his arms and kissed her. And in that kiss, all the grief and the fear and the loneliness of the past months melted away, replaced by a promise of a future, a promise of a home. But secrets in a place like this have a way of staying buried, like bodies in the winter snow. And a promise built on a lie is no promise at all. It's just a cage waiting to be sprung. Ruby had no idea that the man holding her, the man who had saved her, was also the man who had destroyed her. The capture of the Reeves gang should have been the end of the story. Justice served. A neat, tidy bow on a terrible chapter of her life. But as the days turned into weeks, a small, cold splinter of unease worked its way under Ruby's skin. It started with the locket. Her mother's locket. She'd cleaned it 100 times, polishing the silver until it shone, her thumb tracing the familiar etched rose. But one afternoon, with the winter sun slanting through the window, she noticed something she'd never seen before. A tiny, almost invisible scratch near the clasp. Not a scratch, a mark, an initial. It was a B. Her mother's maiden name was Davenport. Her grandmother's was Monroe. There was no B in her family. She tried to dismiss it. Maybe it was just a random mark from the maker, but it bothered her. It felt wrong, like a single note played out of key in a familiar song. Then there were the whispers. The ranch hands were always respectful. But sometimes she'd walk into the barn and conversations would die. She'd catch them watching her, their expressions a strange mix of pity and something else, something that looked like fear. One day she overheard two of them, young Tommy the stable boy and a grizzled old hand named Jed. They didn't see her. They were talking about the posse that went after the Reeves gang. "Still can't believe the boss got away with just a scratch," Tommy said. Jed spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "He's lucky that's all he got. Riding in there like that. Could have gone sideways real easy." "Did you see Reeves?" Tommy asked, his voice hushed. "When they brought him out." "I saw him," Jed grunted. The look on his face. He wasn't looking at the marshal. He was looking at the boss, like he knew him. Ruby slipped away before they could spot her, her heart hammering against her ribs, like he knew him. Samuel had spoken of the Reeves gang like they were monsters, strangers who plagued the territory. But what if they weren't strangers at all? The doubt, once planted, began to grow, its roots wrapping around her heart. She started watching Samuel. She saw the way his eyes would go distant when he thought she wasn't looking. She saw the tension in his shoulders that never seemed to leave, even when he smiled. He was a good man. He was kind and gentle, and he loved her. She was sure of it. But he was hiding something. The night of their engagement party, a small affair at the ranch with the Hands and Martha, the feeling was stronger than ever. Everyone was celebrating, congratulating them. But under the surface, there was a strange current of tension. Martha was watching Samuel with a worried expression. The men were drinking too much, their laughter a little too loud, a little too forced. Late in the evening, Ruby stepped outside for some air. The foreman, a quiet man named Clay, followed her out. He was one of the few who always met her eye, his gaze steady and sad. "Congratulations, ma'am," he said, rolling a cigarette. "The boss, he's a lucky man. Thank you, Clay." She hesitated, then took a chance. "You rode with Samuel, after the Reeves gang." He lit his cigarette, the flare of the match illuminating his weary face. "I did. That man, Reeves," she pressed. "Had you ever seen him before?" Clay took a long drag, the smoke curling up into the cold night air. He looked away, out towards the dark mountains. "Lots of men drift through this territory, ma'am. Hard to keep track." It was a non-answer, a deliberate evasion. He was protecting Samuel. But from what? The final piece of the puzzle fell into place during a trip to Silver Creek a week later. She was in the general store, alone this time, buying thread. Sophia Hughes was there with her mother. Mrs. Hughes ignored her completely, but Sophia approached her when her mother was distracted. "Miss Callahan," she said, her voice low, "I am so happy for you and Mr. Blackwood." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "He is a very determined man. He always gets what he wants." "What do you mean?" Ruby asked. Sophia glanced nervously towards her mother. "My father. He does business with all the ranchers. He told me that Mr. Blackwood had been trying to buy your family's land for months. He said your father wouldn't sell. He was very stubborn about it." She leaned closer. "Mr. Blackwood wanted that land very badly. It has the only year-round creek in the whole valley." She straightened up as her mother called her name. "I just think it's a wonderful coincidence that he was riding by on the very day you needed him most." The words hit Ruby like a physical blow. A coincidence. He wanted the land. Her father wouldn't sell. And then her family was dead, and he was there, the savior, riding out of the smoke. It couldn't be. It was too monstrous. But when she got back to the ranch, she knew what she had to do. She waited until Samuel rode out to check on a herd in the north pasture, knowing he'd be gone for hours. She went to his office, the one room in the house that was his sanctuary, the one place she had never entered. Her hands were trembling as she turned the knob. The door was unlocked. The office was neat, masculine, smelling of leather and old paper. A large desk dominated the room. She started with the drawers. Ledgers, cattle sale records, supply lists. Nothing. Her heart sank. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe she was letting grief and suspicion make her crazy. Then she saw it. A large, rolled-up map on the credenza behind the desk. She unrolled it. It was a survey map of the territory. And there, in the center, was a square of land marked Callahan Homestead. It was circled in red ink. Next to it, in Samuel's neat, precise hand, was a single word: acquired. Her breath hitched. She felt dizzy. Acquired, not to be acquired. Acquired. Past tense. She began searching frantically. There had to be more. In the bottom drawer of the desk, under a stack of old manifests, she found a locked metal box. She looked around the room, her eyes landing on a heavy iron poker by the fireplace. With a surge of desperate strength, she jammed it into the lock and pried. The metal groaned, then snapped. Inside was a folded sheaf of papers, a deed of sale, for the Callahan homestead. The sale price was $500, a fortune, and at the bottom were the signatures. One was Samuel Blackwood, the other, shaky but clear, was her father's. And the date. The date was the day before the attack. Her father had sold the land. He had sold the land, and then he was dead. Why hadn't he told her? Why had Samuel lied? He hadn't just found her. He had been on his way to his newly acquired property. He hadn't rescued a stranger. He had found the sole surviving daughter of the man he'd just done business with. But it was the paper underneath the deed that made the blood freeze in her veins. It was a letter. The handwriting was rough, almost illiterate. It read, "Blackwood, the job is done. The old man and his wife put up a fight. The girl got away in the fire. My men are looking for her. We know she's with you. My price for finishing the job and for my silence has gone up. We'll be coming to collect. R. R. Not the Reeves gang. Just R." Jed's words came back to her. The look on his face. He was looking at the boss, like he knew him. Ruby stumbled back, the letter fluttering from her numb fingers. A wave of nausea washed over her. He hadn't just lied. He hadn't just hidden the sale of the land. He had hired these men. He had hired the men who murdered her parents. Her savior, her love, the man who had promised her a new life, was a cold-blooded killer. And he had brought her here not as a rescue, but as a prisoner. The ranch wasn't a sanctuary. It was a cage. And the man who held the key was on his way home. The sound of a horse in the yard made her jump. He was back, early. She scrambled to put the papers back, to close the box, but it was too late. The office door swung open. Samuel stood there, his hat in his hand, a smile on his face. The smile died when he saw the broken lockbox, the deed in her hand, the terror on her face. The kindness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a look of utter desolation. "Ruby," he said, his voice a ragged whisper, "I can explain." "Explain what?" she choked out, backing away until she hit the cold stone of the fireplace. "Explain how you bought our land, and then had my parents murdered so you wouldn't have to pay." "No, God, no, it wasn't like that." He took a step towards her, his hands held out. "Don't move," she shrieked, grabbing the iron poker. The very same one she'd used to open the box. It was heavy in her hand. "Don't you come near me." Pain, raw and deep, contorted his face. "Please, Ruby, just listen to me. Yes, I bought the land. Your father. He'd found some silver, just a small vein, not enough to make him rich, but enough to get him and your mother back to Boston, to live comfortably. We signed the deed. I paid him the $500 in cash. He was going to tell you that night." "You're a liar," she sobbed. "I'm not," he insisted, his voice desperate. "The man who led the attack. His name is Rawlins. Jacob Rawlins. He was my foreman. I fired him a month before for stealing. He knew I was buying the land. He must have followed me. He knew I paid your father in cash. He wasn't there for the land, Ruby. He was there for the money. When your father fought back, things went wrong." The poker shook in her hands. "The letter. It said the job is done. You hired him." "No, he's trying to blackmail me. He thinks I'll pay him for his silence because the whole territory thinks the Reeves gang did it. I rode out there that morning to take possession of my new property. When I saw the smoke, when I found you, I couldn't tell you the truth." His eyes pleaded with her. "How could I tell you that the man who wanted to be your husband was the man whose ex-foreman had just murdered your family? I was a coward. I should have told you from the start. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" She laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. "You brought me here, to the one place he knows to find me. You let me live in this house, fall in love with you, all of it based on a lie." "I love you, Ruby," he said, tears welling in his own eyes. "That was never a lie. Everything I feel for you is real." "What was the B on the locket?" she demanded, the small detail suddenly looming large. "What was that?" He looked confused for a second. "The locket? What are you talking about?" "There's a B scratched on it. For Blackwood. Was it yours? Did you drop it there and then pretend to find it?" He shook his head, looking completely lost. I don't know anything about a B on the locket. Ruby, I swear to you." She didn't believe him. She couldn't believe anything anymore. Her entire world had been built on a foundation of lies, and it was all crumbling to dust around her. He had wanted the land, and now he had it. He had the woman who came with it, too. How convenient. "So where is he now?" she spat. "Rawlins, this monster you created." "I don't know. The letter. It was slipped under the door last night. He's close. That's why I came back early. I had a bad feeling." He took another cautious step. "We need to get you away from here. We need to go to town, to the marshal." A gunshot exploded from outside. The window of the office shattered, spraying glass across the floor. Samuel tackled Ruby, throwing them both to the ground as another shot ripped through the wood where they had been standing. Shouts erupted from the yard, the thunder of hoofbeats. It was too late to run. Rawlins wasn't coming to collect. He was here, and he had come to finish the job. The ranch erupted into chaos. Gunshots cracked through the air, sharp and deadly. Men were shouting, horses screaming. Samuel dragged Ruby away from the window, his body shielding hers. "Stay down!" he yelled over the din. He crawled to the wall, grabbing a heavy rifle from the rack. The look on his face was one she'd never seen before. The kind rancher was gone. In his place was a man of cold, hard fury. "How many are with him?" she asked, her voice shaking. "4, maybe 5, he said, peering cautiously around the edge of the shattered window frame. "They're using the wagons for cover." He looked back at her, his eyes locking with hers. "I am so sorry, Ruby, for all of this." Another bullet slammed into the log wall above their heads. There was no time for apologies. "Where are your men?" "Clay and Jed are in the barn. The others are in the bunkhouse. They're pinned down." He checked the rifle's load. "He wants you, Ruby. You're the only one who can identify him, and he wants whatever money he thinks I have in the house." He took a deep breath. "I'm not going to let him get either." He moved like a predator, low and fast, across the office to the door. "Stay here. Don't make a sound." He slipped out into the main room, leaving her alone in the wreckage of his office, the damning papers scattered on the floor. She could hear him shouting orders from the front of the house, the sharp report of his rifle answering the shots from outside. Ruby huddled behind the heavy oak desk, her mind racing. He'd lied to her. He'd put her in unimaginable danger. But as the bullets flew, a terrible truth dawned on her. Right now, he was the only thing standing between her and the men who had murdered her family. If he died, she was next. Her life was tied to the man she now hated. She couldn't just hide. She wouldn't. She remembered her father teaching her to shoot their small hunting rifle. "You never know when you'll need to protect yourself, Ruby girl," he'd said. She crawled to the gun rack. There was one rifle left, a lighter Winchester. She checked it. It was loaded. Her hands were slick with sweat, but she held it tight. She was done being a victim. The fighting raged. It felt like hours. The sound of gunfire was constant, punctuated by the splintering of wood and the shattering of glass. She heard a man cry out in pain from the yard, then another. She crept to the door of the office, peering into the main room. Samuel was crouched behind an overturned sofa, firing methodically through a broken window. Suddenly, the front door burst open. A burly, bearded man stood there, a pistol in each hand. Rollins. His eyes were wild and cruel. He didn't see Samuel. He was looking past him, looking for her. Samuel reacted instantly. He swung his rifle around, but Rollins fired first. The shot went wide, but the second one hit Samuel in the shoulder. He cried out, staggering back, his rifle clattering to the floor. Rollins grinned, a predator cornering his prey. He stepped into the house, raising his pistol to finish Samuel off. "No!" The scream was ripped from Ruby's throat. She stepped out from the office, raising the Winchester. Her arms shook, but her aim was steady. She sighted down the barrel, just like her father taught her, right at the center of Rollins's chest. He turned, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw her. The grin faltered. "The girl," he snarled. He swung his pistol towards her. She fired. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the sound deafening inside the house. A red flower bloomed on Rollins's chest. The surprised look on his face was permanent. He stumbled backward, his pistols firing uselessly into the ceiling as he fell. He hit the floor with a heavy thud and didn't move again. Silence. The sudden absence of noise was as shocking as the gunfire had been. Ruby stood there, the rifle smoking in her hands, her ears ringing. Samuel was on the floor, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. He was staring at her, his expression a mixture of awe and agony. Clay and Jed burst in through the now open door, their guns raised. They stopped short, taking in the scene. The dead man on the floor, the boss bleeding, and Ruby standing over them both with a rifle in her hand. "It's over," Clay said, his voice rough with relief, as he saw the other attackers fleeing on their horses. "They're running." Ruby let the rifle slip from her fingers. Her legs gave out and she sank to her knees, the adrenaline draining away, leaving her hollow and trembling. It was over, but nothing was fixed. They got Samuel onto the sofa. The bullet had gone clean through his shoulder. It was painful, but it wouldn't kill him. As Ruby and Martha worked to bandage the wound, the full weight of the day crashed down on her. She had killed a man, the man who murdered her parents. She should have felt victorious, vindicated. Instead, she just felt empty, numb. After the wound was dressed, Samuel sent everyone away. He and Ruby were left alone in the trashed living room, the body of Jacob Rollins still lying by the door. "You saved my life," Samuel said, his voice weak. "You lied to me," she replied, her voice flat. "You put my life in danger." "I know," he whispered. "I was a fool. I was scared. I saw a chance to have you, and I was terrified the truth would drive you away. And it did." He looked at the papers, still scattered on the floor of his office. "Everything I told you in there was the truth, Ruby. I didn't hire him, but I am responsible. His greed was born from my business. Your parents' blood. It's on my hands. I'll carry that for the rest of my life." She looked at him, at his pale, pain-filled face. She wanted to hate him. Every part of her screamed that she should walk out that door and never look back. But where would she go? What would she do? And despite the lies, despite the betrayal, she couldn't erase the memory of his kindness, the safety she had felt in his arms. She couldn't erase the fact that, when it mattered, he had tried to protect her, and she had protected him. "What now, Samuel?" she asked, the question hanging in the silent, broken room. "That's up to you," he said. "The marshal will be here soon. I'll tell him everything, the whole truth. They'll probably arrest me, for withholding evidence, for obstruction. I don't know." He met her gaze, his blue eyes filled with despair. "The ranch. The deed is legal. Half of it is yours. My lawyer in Denver has a will. It leaves everything to you. It always has, since the week you arrived." The confession stunned her. He had planned to give her everything, even before he claimed to love her. Was it guilt, or was it something more? "You can stay here," he continued, "or you can sell it and go back to Boston. You can do whatever you want. You're free." She looked around the room, at the shattered furniture, the bullet holes in the walls. This was the home he had offered her, a home built on a terrible secret. She thought of the simple life she'd had with her parents. It was gone forever. There was no going back. There was only forward. The marshal arrived an hour later. Samuel, true to his word, told him everything. He confessed to knowing Rollins was the killer, to concealing the sale of the land, to letting the Reeves gang take the blame. The marshal listened, his face grim. As Samuel had predicted, he was placed under arrest. As they led him away, he stopped in front of Ruby. "Whatever you decide to do," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I hope you find happiness. You deserve it." She watched them ride away, taking the man who was her savior, her betrayer, her lover, her enemy, all wrapped into one. She was alone again, standing in the ruins. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't helpless. She had the ranch, she had the money, and she had a choice. The next few weeks were a painful blur. Ruby oversaw the repairs to the ranch house. She directed the men, who looked at her with a new, profound respect. She was no longer just the boss's fiancée. She was the woman who had faced down Jacob Rollins and won. She was the mistress of Blackwood Ranch. She met with Samuel's lawyer, a stuffy man from Denver who confirmed everything. Samuel had indeed drawn up a new will the week she arrived, making her his sole heir. He'd also set up an account in her name, into which he had deposited $1,000, the $500 he'd paid her father, doubled. The lawyer explained that given Samuel's cooperation and the circumstances, he would likely face a prison sentence of 5 to 10 years. 5 to 10 years, a lifetime. The lawyer looked at her over his spectacles. "Mr. Blackwood also instructed me to give you this." He handed her a small sealed envelope. She took it back to the ranch and sat by the fire in the now repaired living room. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was a letter from Samuel, written in the Silver Creek jail. "My dearest Ruby," it began. "If you are reading this, it means you have not yet sold the ranch and fled back to civilization. For that small hope I am grateful. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I must try to explain the one thing you would not believe. The locket. After the marshal took me away, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. The bee. I asked Clay if he saw anything when he helped bury your father. He said yes. He saw the locket on the ground. But as he reached for it, he saw something else in the dirt. A branding iron. A small one. A line brand. The kind used for marking tools or saddles. It had fallen out of one of the attacker's saddlebags. It was in the shape of a bee. It must have been red hot from the fire, and when it fell, it must have landed on the locket, branding the initial into the silver. Clay picked it up and gave it to me later. He thought it was just a piece of junk, but it wasn't. It belonged to a neighboring ranch, the Bar B. The owner, Bill Blevins, had been complaining for months about a hired hand who had stolen from him and run off. A man with wild, cruel eyes and a beard, Jacob Rollins. He was branding his stolen goods. The B was never for Blackwood, Ruby. It was the clue that could have identified him from the start, a clue I was too blind with my own lies to see. I have given the branding iron to the marshal. I hope it helps prove my story. And I hope, somehow, it proves to you that not everything between us was a lie. My love for you, Ruby, was the only true thing in this whole sorry mess. Please do not waste your life waiting for me. Build a new one. Be happy. That is all I ask. Yours, Samuel. Ruby let the letter fall into her lap. She picked up the locket from the mantelpiece. There it was, the tiny, scarred B. Not a mark of ownership from the man who had bought her land, but a random, meaningless brand from the man who had destroyed her life. A coincidence. A terrible, cruel coincidence. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. The hate, the anger that had been a hard, cold stone in her chest began to crack. He had still lied. He had still been a coward. But he hadn't been a monster. He had been a man trapped by his own mistakes, a man who loved her enough to give her everything, even if it meant he lost it all. She made her decision. The next morning, she rode into Silver Creek. She didn't go to the bank or the land office. She went to the marshal's office. She told him about the branding iron, corroborating Samuel's story. She told him how Samuel had protected her, how he had fought Rollins. She told him that Samuel Blackwood was not a criminal, but a man who had been blackmailed and had made a terrible mistake. She hired the best lawyer in Denver, using the money Samuel had given her to argue his case. Months passed. Ruby ran the ranch. She thrived. The work was hard, but it was honest. She found a strength in herself she never knew she possessed. She was no longer the scared girl from Boston or the grieving victim in the snow. She was a rancher, a survivor. The trial was in Denver. Ruby was the star witness. She stood before the judge and told her story. All of it. The fire, the rescue, the lies, the shootout. She spoke of Samuel's guilt and his cowardice, but also of his love and his ultimate bravery. In the end, the judge was lenient. Samuel was convicted of obstruction, but given Rollins's death and the extenuating circumstances, his sentence was reduced. 3 years. The day he was released, Ruby was there waiting for him at the prison gates. He was thinner, his face etched with new lines, his hair showing streaks of gray. He stopped when he saw her, his eyes full of disbelief and hope. "Ruby," he breathed. She didn't run into his arms. She just stood there, waiting. "You told me to build a new life," she said, her voice steady. "I have. The ranch is doing well. We turned a profit last year." He swallowed hard. "I'm glad." He looked down at his hands. I don't expect you to." "I am not the same girl you found in the snow, Samuel," she cut him off. "And you are not the same man who put her on his horse. We've both been through the fire. What was built on lies has been burned away." She took a step towards him. "The question is, what do we build now, in its place, with the truth?" He looked up, and for the first time in 3 years, she saw the kind, gentle man she had first fallen for, the man behind the lies and the fear. "Can you forgive me?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I already have," she said. "But forgiving is not the same as forgetting. Our life will not be a simple love story. It will be built on this scar." She touched the locket at her throat. "But it will be real, and it will be ours." He closed the distance between them and took her hand. His touch was hesitant, questioning. She squeezed back, a firm, solid promise. They didn't kiss. They just stood there for a long moment. Two survivors in the harsh western sun, the past behind them, the future an open, unwritten range. They got into the wagon and began the long ride home, not to Blackwood Ranch, but to their ranch. A place of new beginnings, forged in fire and truth. And as the years went on, they built a life richer and stronger than any silver dream, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most beautiful things can grow from the most scorched and broken ground. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and redemption, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the edge of the wild.